Hello, hello. My name is NicholassRivas. I talk about politics and stuff, and today we're going to be talking about the banning of Black history and intersectionality within Florida schools by Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, the most likely candidate to be the president, in my opinion, of the United States after Joe Biden's first term. He is pushing for a banning of AP classes for Black history amongst high schools. Reading the article, the classes that he is looking to put a ban on is an AP course, college aid or college credited courses that pretty advanced when it comes to history and the topics, and they seem to have dealt with intersectionality, Black history, and reparations, topics that seem to be very nuanced and hard to really pin down in just a simple history course, given why it's an AP. So DeSantis comes out, wants to ban it, but the critique I have and that many others in the academia field have is that there's no pinpoint of inaccuracies, right? Like he didn't say, hey, reparations are bad. I don't like how you're teaching chapter 2 of reparations or chapter 3 of intersectionality. He didn't pinpoint anything. He just said that it's ideologically against what they're pushing for and that it's shouldn't be taught to high school students. Now, let's throw out the fact that this is an AP course. Not all students are going to be affected by it. Let's toss out the fact that this is college level, so it's meant to be very specific. It's meant to be a lot more nuanced, right? Rather than the history classes you would get at a lower level freshman year. The Constitution was signed at X date. Slavery was abolished on this date. Like very, very simple in terms of the more relative advanced topics. So there seems to be nothing against just teaching history, but it's the nuances that come with the ideological differences of the Republican Party. Like I just don't know how to pin it with this guy. I don't know how to proceed because there's no specifics. And I think the specifics would shoot DeSantis in the foot. It's okay to say you're against reparations, but that's what Black leaders are calling for. So that's what they're teaching. That's my assumption. I'm not in the course. I don't see the curriculum. But if they're talking about reparations, I'm doubtful that they're saying we need reparations. I'm pretty sure they're talking about the topics of the Malcolm X's and Martin Luther King's when they talk about reparations, because it's a part of history. Martin Luther King should be taught to children, and his ideology was pretty controversial given, I wouldn't teach it to a freshman, but a senior course maybe you can teach about his more communistic ideology and maybe his more social democracy, hatred against capitalism, right? Like you can teach that. I mean, you must teach that because he is a founding father of the civil rights movement that we see today. So you have to talk about Martin Luther King. You have to dive deep, and maybe not super deep where you talk about every facet of his life, but to not jump in and talk about him with that much detail is a disservice. Why is this an AP class, right? We could easily just say he marched in Salem, and then he died in this day. Like that's what simple history should teach, right? We don't go into the nuances. Maybe on a subtle level, maybe not in that detail. Not to say you can't have any, but that's what the AP courses were for. That's what the more advanced courses were for, were to jump in the nuances. Now, that's a very dangerous, slippery slope for the Republican Party to hear that this very fond, respected American is, pushing communist ideologies. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to teach that if I was a Republican. And that's what we boil it down to, is the Republican Party isn't looking to have this fair, nuanced discussion. They just don't want these ideologies being pushed because it makes people question our capitalistic system, our systematic racism, our institutional racism, our hatred and bigotry that we have from the ground up, right? We don't just have just one or two bad apples. We have some pretty intrinsic issues with our systems that target Black and brown people. So you discuss it like that, it makes the Republican Party look like they're trying to keep it that way, right? Look, when you bring these up to DeSantis, he's not looking to talk about reparations. He's not looking to talk about legalization of drugs or the pardoning of criminals with non-violent drug offenses, right? Like those are topics that one like Dr. King would probably push for and probably has pushed for and most likely did push for. But you're not going to see that with the DeSantis because it makes them look bad. Any policy, pound for pound, that the Republicans are pushing is nowhere near the ideology that really furthers the Black community and any community, right? When you push for like a Medicare for all, that really fixes a lot of issues that Americans have in our current society. but it helps a lot of black people. And so you know, because they're the ones who are statistically being affected more by our medical system. And it's not a fix. It's definitely a band-aid. We have a lot of education we need to push for. We have a lot of you know, other doings that we can do, but it's one of the many that, you know, will take down the Jenga tower of our kind of fucked up system. These are things you don't want to hear Republicans talk about, because the minute they start talking about it, they're going to say, well, I don't want that, and I don't want that, I don't like that, I don't like that. No, no, no. I'm not saying I agree with reparations, but you talk about it and it's going to make them uncomfortable. It doesn't make me uncomfortable because I have a reason why I don't push for it. I don't push for it because I believe there are better systems. I believe it's too hard to pin down a black person and say, okay, you're 100% black, time to give you a check. Like, I just don't think that fits very well. And I think that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people when you can push something for maybe like a UBI. Everyone gets a check. I know it seems very like political and politician to just give everyone something when people are suffering more, but I think it's a step in the right direction to give it to everyone. People who are in poverty, people who are suffering, you know, show no skin into many of the Americans when voting. And even though it is seem more likely that the black community is going to be affected by poverty, I think it's an easier sell to get the white community to say you could also get a check, because they're truthfully, they could be, if you're pushing for reparations, I think another community would be like, no, fuck you, I'm not voting for that. I think it's easier pill if we have UBI, and I believe in UBI more because I want people to have UBI. I want people to have Medicare for all. These are systems that I think you can push, but if you frame it under a black, you know, discussion, it's definitely something useful. It's definitely something it's I think would be helpful and beneficial to any society, any youngin. And I wish we taught it at even at a younger age, because it's something that it's not gonna, if your kid is so fragile to hear that reparations is a thing, you're not teaching them right as well. And I know people are fearful of the communism, but if your kid is strong and you think capitalist systems are strong and you believe in them, what's so scary about having your kid learn from some other world, some foreign idea, some crazy different community from their own? That's where I push it and say, let's educate people. Let's see how they feel about it. Let's put the ideas out there. I don't want to teach them just about our economic system. I want to teach them about other systems to see what they think about it. What does our fares better? What's our goal when it comes to our systems? And that's why I push for stuff like the universal incomes, because the universal basic incomes, because I think it helps everyone. But I can say that with confidence because I believe if someone came up to me and said, I want just a universal income for the black community, I would disagree with them. We would talk, but I'm aware of the reparations that I've heard from the Dr. Kings and even the Louis Farrakhan's. Even though I disagree with them on the idea, we can go back and forth, and I'm not afraid to hear them out, because I want to hear them out. I want to have someone give me this idea of why they believe reparations for one community is better than my idea of having a universal, you know. But when these Republicans come, I think it just kind of tumbles their whole policy and idea, because they just want to say, fuck you, give me tax cuts, suck my dick. Like, that's their mindset. So it is what it is. You take it as you take it, and you keep pushing. But Florida is really the pinnacle of showing you how society is going to crumble if we continue to perpetuate the Jim Crows and the bigotries that we've continued for all these years. So it is what it is. Thank y'all very much. Peace.